My ex's sister asked me for one dance in the middle of her wedding reception. I hadn't touched anyone from that family in 3 years. Not even by accident. The band was playing something slow. My glass was still full. And every table near the dance floor went quiet when she held out her hand. Then Madison leaned close enough that her perfume cut through the champagne and whispered, "She never deserved you." My name is Noah Bennett. I was 37 years old, a financial compliance manager in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I had spent the last 3 years building a quiet life out of what my ex-wife left behind. I checked non-profit budgets for a living, which meant I knew how to read what people tried to hide in neat columns. But nothing on paper had ever trained me for seeing the Hawthorne family again, dressed in silk and confidence, acting like they had not once helped break me in public. I had not gone to that wedding for closure. People say that when they want to sound healed. I went because Madison Hawthorne had sent me an invitation in a cream envelope with my name written in her own hand. And beneath the printed card, she had added one sentence in blue ink. "You were family to me once, and I would be honored if you came." That sentence sat on my kitchen counter for 9 days before I answered. The bride was not my ex. That would have been too theatrical, even for the Hawthornes. Madison was my ex-wife's younger sister, the one person in that family who had never raised her voice at me, never called me unstable, never accused me of being jealous when I noticed things I was not supposed to notice. She had been 23 when I married Claire, soft-spoken, watchful, always standing in doorways like she wanted to say something, but had been taught not to interrupt adults who were lying. Claire Hawthorne was the kind of woman people forgave before she apologized. She had blonde hair that always looked expensive, a laugh that made men turn their heads, and a gift for saying cruel things in a tone so light that everyone else thought you were too sensitive for bleeding. When she told me I was safe, not exciting. Her mother laughed. When she said I worried too much about money because I grew up around lack, her father nodded like she had made a fair observation. I had grown up in Raleigh with a school nurse mother and a mechanic father. People who kept receipts in shoeboxes and believed love meant showing up even when you were tired. Claire grew up in Myers Park, in a house with columns, Catavas, and portraits of ancestors who had never once had to check their bank balance before buying groceries. To her family, my steadiness looked like dullness. My boundaries looked like insecurity. My questions looked like disrespect. The night our marriage ended was not the night she cheated. That had happened before. Quietly. Probably more than once. It ended at her parents' anniversary party, under a white tent behind the Hawthorne house, while 200 guests ate scallops and pretended not to listen. I had found messages on her old iPad that afternoon, not even hidden well, just sitting there beneath a calendar notification. Dinner plans, hotel names, a joke about how I would never confront her in front of real people. I confronted her anyway. Not dramatically, not loudly. I asked her to step into the side hall near the catering kitchen, and I asked if Daniel Pierce was the reason she had stopped coming home before midnight. Claire looked at me for a long moment, then smiled like I had handed her a weapon. She walked straight back into the tent, tapped her spoon against a glass, and told everyone I had been tracking her movements because I couldn't handle her having male colleagues. By the time I reached her, her mother already had one hand pressed to her chest. Her father had that disappointed look rich men use when they want to turn punishment into etiquette. Claire cried without tears. She said I had embarrassed her. She said I had always been controlling. She said she had tried to love a man who felt threatened by her success. But she could not keep shrinking herself to protect my pride. Nobody asked to see the messages. Nobody asked me one question. Her brother told me to leave before I made it worse. Her father took my elbow like I was a drunk cousin at Christmas. Her mother said, "Noah, if you had any respect for this family, you would go quietly." And Claire stood behind them. Small and wounded and perfect, while the man from the messages watched from a table near the roses. I left with my jacket in my hand and my wedding ring still on, outside, in the circular driveway. I remember looking back at the house and seeing Madison through an upstairs window. She was not smiling. She had both palms against the glass. For 1 second, I thought she might come down. She didn't. I drove home alone. And by morning, the story had already been rewritten without me. Claire filed first. That mattered to her. She told mutual friends I had become paranoid. Her family said they were worried about my temper, though I had never raised a hand to anyone in my life. Her father made one phone call to the board of a children's literacy foundation, where I had just been offered a finance director position, and somehow the offer disappeared. No accusation ever arrived in writing. It never does when people know exactly how to stay clean. For months, I lived inside that kind of damage. The kind nobody can photograph. Invitations stopped coming. Men I used to have lunch with became busy. Women I had known for years looked at me with careful pity, as if kindness might be contagious. I kept going to work, kept paying the mortgage on a house that felt suddenly too loud, kept answering emails with complete sentences while my hands shook under the desk. The only thing I kept from that marriage was a box of documents. Not because I planned revenge. I was too tired for revenge. I kept it because my father had raised me to keep records when people started acting strange. Bank statements, printed texts. The withdrawal slip from the joint account Claire emptied 3 days before filing. The email from Daniel Pierce, accidentally copied to me, thanking her for handling Noah before the annual donor retreat. All of it went into a black accordion folder in my closet. I never used it. That is what people like Claire count on. They count on your exhaustion. They count on your dignity. They count on the fact that explaining the wound often makes you look wounded. And wounded people are easy to dismiss. So, I let the divorce finish. I signed what needed signing. I sold the house. I moved into a 2-bedroom condo near Dilworth with quiet neighbors and morning light. 3 years passed, but not like a movie montage. There was no sudden promotion that turned me into a different man. There were early mornings, therapy appointments, a coffee maker that broke twice, and Saturdays when I stood in the grocery store, unable to choose cereal because marriage had trained me to ask someone else what they wanted first. Healing was not glamorous. It was mostly repetition. Pay the bill. Answer the call. Take the walk. Do not text her. Eventually, I became good at being alone, not lonely. Alone. There is a difference people only understand after they stop begging for noise. I learned to cook for one without making it feel like punishment. I bought a small oak table because I liked it, not because it matched anyone's idea of taste. I took a job reviewing grant compliance for regional hospitals and education nonprofits, and I became useful in a way nobody could perform at a dinner party. Then Madison's invitation arrived. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Or worse, a trap made of lace and nostalgia. I had not heard from her since the divorce. Not one message. Not one apology. Her silence had been part of the wound, even if I understood it better than the others. The Hawthorne family did not encourage independent witnesses. They preferred loyalty, which in their language meant obedience with good manners. I almost threw the invitation away. Instead, I set it beside the coffee maker and let it accuse me for a week. On the 9th morning, I wrote back, "I'll be there." No explanation. No warmth. I did not feel. But my hand was steady when I sealed the envelope. And that told me something. I was not going back as the man they escorted out of that tent. The wedding was at the Beaumont Hotel downtown. All marble floors, gold light, and flowers arranged to look casual at a price no casual person would believe. I arrived alone in a charcoal suit. Claire had once said, made me look like a nervous accountant at a funeral. I wore it anyway. The valet took my keys. The doorman smiled. And for the first time in 3 years, I stepped into a room where people had been trained to misunderstand me. Claire saw me before I saw her. I felt it first. That old pressure between my shoulder blades. The sense of being judged by someone who had once studied me closely enough to know where to cut. When I turned, she was standing near the champagne tower in a pale green dress. One hand resting on Daniel Pierce's arm. So it had not been a rumor. She had married the man from the messages. She looked almost exactly the same. That startled me more than it should have. I had changed in quiet, private ways. But Claire still carried herself like the world had been arranged in advance for her comfort. Daniel leaned down and said something in her ear. She laughed, then looked at me with a softness that was not apology. It was ownership. As if I were an old piece of furniture she was surprised to see in someone else's house. Her mother noticed next. Evelyn Hawthorne's smile tightened by half an inch, which was the closest she ever came to panic in public. Her father, Richard, gave me a nod so small it could have been denied, under oath. I nodded back. Not because I respected him, because I respected myself enough not to give him a scene he could use. That was the first lesson I learned after Claire. Do not hand cruel people a louder version of your pain. Madison found me near the guest book. She was in white. Of course, but not the cold, sculpted kind of white Claire would have chosen. Her dress had sleeves of soft lace and a skirt that moved when she breathed. She looked older than I remembered. Not in years, but in the eyes. When she hugged me, she held on for 1 second too long. Then she pulled back and said, "Thank you for coming, Noah." I told her she looked happy. She smiled, but her eyes flicked over my shoulder toward Claire. That was when I knew this invitation had not been just kindness. Something was moving under the surface of that wedding. Something the flowers and string quartet could not cover. Madison's new husband, Aaron, came over and shook my hand with both of his. He knew who I was, not the story they had told. Maybe the real one. The ceremony was beautiful in the way public ceremonies often are, polished enough to hide the private labor behind them. Madison cried when she said her vows. Aaron cried too. Claire dabbed at her eyes without disturbing her makeup. Evelyn whispered something to Richard that made his jaw tighten. I sat 4 rows back, hands folded, feeling strangely calm. The room was full of people who had once believed the worst about me, and I no longer needed them to correct themselves. At dinner, I was seated with Madison's college friends. Not with the family. That was mercy. Or strategy. Maybe both. They were kind in the harmless way. Strangers can be kind when they do not know which history sits beside them. I ate chicken in a lemon sauce and listened to stories about Madison's graduate school days and tried not to notice Claire watching me from the head table. She looked annoyed. Not hurt. Annoyed. There is a difference. The first speech came from Richard. He spoke about legacy, loyalty, and the sacred responsibility of protecting family reputation. He used those exact words. Reputation, loyalty, family. I felt my fingers curl around the stem of my water glass. Men like Richard never say truth when reputation will do. They never say love when loyalty gives them more control. Everyone applauded. I did too. Slowly. Because sometimes applause is just the sound of staying unreadable. Then Claire stood to speak. That was not on the program card. Madison's face changed so quickly. Most people missed it. But I didn't. Claire lifted her glass and smiled at her sister with that practiced tenderness she wore when she wanted witnesses. She talked about childhood secrets and borrowed dresses. She joked that Madison had always been too forgiving for her own good. Then her eyes moved to me for half a second. Some of us, Claire said lightly, learn the hard way that love needs trust, not suspicion. A few people chuckled. Uncertain, but obedient. My ears filled with heat. 3 years ago, that sentence would have split me open. That night, it landed against something harder. I looked at Madison instead of Claire. Her face had gone pale beneath the bridal makeup, and her hand was clenched around Erin's under the table. That was when I understood something. Claire had not invited me into that sentence by accident. She wanted to test whether the old version of me would appear. The defensive man. The humiliated man. The man who would stand up too fast and prove her story by trying to correct it in front of strangers. She had brought the knife back to the table and expected me to grab the blade. I did not move. I let the silence pass over me. I took one sip of water. Daniel Pierce watched me like he was disappointed I had not performed. Richard leaned back, satisfied. Evelyn smiled at Madison as if nothing had happened. And Madison, the bride, stared down at her plate with a look I recognized because I had worn it myself. The look of someone realizing the people who claim to love you will use your most important day if it helps them stay in control. The dancing began after dessert. I planned to leave after the first song. I had already done more than I thought I could. I had walked into the room. I had seen Claire. I had survived her little performance without becoming part of it. That seemed like enough. I was reaching for my coat check ticket when the band shifted into a slow song and the crowd opened near the center of the floor. Madison appeared in front of me before I could step away. She was still holding her bouquet. Though most brides would have handed it off by then, her eyes were bright. But not from champagne. She looked over her shoulder once, toward the head table, then back at me. Noah, she said quietly. Would you dance with me? The guests nearby went still in that subtle southern way, where nobody turns their head and everybody listens. I should have said no. That would have been easier, cleaner. But Madison's hand was trembling. And I remembered the girl in the upstairs window with both palms pressed to the glass while I stood alone in the driveway below. I stood up. I gave her my hand. Across the room, Claire's smile disappeared so completely. It was almost worth the last 3 years. We stepped onto the dance floor beneath a chandelier, large enough to look borrowed from another century. Madison's hand rested lightly on my shoulder. Mine stayed careful at her back, formal enough that no one could twist it into something ugly. For a few measures, neither of us spoke. I could feel the room watching us. I feel the old story trying to rearrange itself around this new image. The discarded husband, the bride, the ex-wife at the head table, suddenly no longer holding the frame. Then Madison leaned closer, her voice barely louder than the music. "She never deserved you," she whispered. My breath caught before I could stop it. Not because I still needed Claire's sister to absolve me. I had worked too hard for that. It caught because of what came after. Madison swallowed, and her fingers tightened against my shoulder. "And I should have told the truth the night they made you leave." I missed a step. Just one. Enough for her to notice. Not enough for anyone else to call it a scene. My mouth went dry. The chandelier blurred for half a second. And suddenly I was back in that driveway with my jacket in my hand, and my whole life being rewritten behind me. I looked at Madison, really looked at her, and saw fear sitting underneath the bridal calm. "What truth?" I asked. She glanced toward Claire, then toward Richard, then down at the bouquet still trapped between us like a white flag nobody had accepted. "Not here," she said. "But before this night is over, you need to know why they were so afraid of you." Madison did not tell me everything on the dance floor. She couldn't. Not with Claire staring at us like she was trying to set the music on fire with her eyes. And not with Richard Hawthorne already leaning toward his wife, whispering through a smile. So Madison finished the song with her hand trembling against my shoulder. When the last note faded, she stepped back, smiled for the room, and kissed my cheek like any grateful bride, thanking an old family friend. Then she pressed something small into my palm. It was a folded place card from table 12, the ivory kind with gold trim. From a distance, it looked harmless. Up close, I saw 3 words written inside in Madison's careful script. Library, 10 minute. I closed my hand around it. Before Claire could see, Madison turned back toward Aaron, laughing too brightly as he pulled her into another dance. And I walked toward the bar like a man who needed water. The Beaumont Hotel library was not a real library. It was a polished room with dark shelves, leather chairs, and decorative books no guest was meant to read. I found it at the end of a hallway behind the ballroom, past a pair of waiters carrying trays of untouched cake. The door was half open. Inside, Madison stood near the window, veil removed, bouquet on the table beside her, like she had finally put down something heavier than flowers. "You don't have to do this tonight," I said. It was the first thing that came out because I could see the cost of whatever she was holding back. Her wedding dress looked too bright in that dim room. Her mascara had smudged at one corner. Not enough for guests to notice, but enough for me to know she had been crying somewhere. Nobody was supposed to look. "Yes, I do," she said, "because if I wait until tomorrow, my mother will tell me I imagined it. My father will tell me I'm embarrassing the family. Claire will cry. And somehow, by lunch, I'll be apologizing for ruining my own wedding." She gave a small, bitter laugh that did not belong on a bride. "That's how it works with us. You know that better than anyone." I did know. I knew the smooth machinery of the Hawthorne family. One person did the harm. One person polished the story. One person punished, whoever remembered correctly. By the time they were finished, The injured person looked unstable for bleeding. I had lived inside that machine. I had been fed into it, ground down, and pushed out with a polite statement about concern and privacy. Madison folded her arms over her waist. That night at my parents' anniversary party, I heard Claire before you confronted her. She was in my father's study with Daniel. The door wasn't closed. All the way, I was looking for ribbon because Mom wanted the gift table fixed before photos. She stopped and looked down at her wedding ring. Twisting it once, Claire knew you had seen something. Not the affair, the invoices. For a moment, I did not understand. The affair had been the center of my pain for so long that my mind resisted moving around it. Then another memory came back with a sick little click. 6 weeks before the anniversary party, Claire had asked me to review a vendor spreadsheet for a charity gala her family foundation was hosting. She said her father wanted a numbers person to glance over it. I had found duplicate payments, strange retainers, consulting fees routed through a company I did not recognize. When I asked about it, Claire kissed my cheek and told me I was adorable when I was thorough. The next day, she said, her father had decided to let his own accountant handle it. A week later, Daniel Pierce started appearing in conversations more often, always as a donor strategist, always as someone Richard trusted. I remember feeling uneasy. But marriage trains you to doubt yourself when the person you love makes confidence look effortless. Madison watched recognition settle on my face. "You ask too many normal questions," she said. "That was the problem. You didn't accuse anyone. You didn't threaten anyone. You just noticed the numbers didn't match. And my father realized if you ever took that finance director job with the Literacy Foundation, you might see the same vendor names there too." My throat tightened. The offer that disappeared. She nodded. "Dad called Russell Avery the morning after the party. I heard that too. He said you were in a difficult emotional state and that hiring you would create reputational risk. He said the family wanted to avoid formal concerns. For everyone's sake." Her mouth twisted on those last words. Formal concerns. That's how he ruins people. He never has to accuse. He just sounds disappointed enough that other men fill in the blanks. I sat down because standing felt suddenly artificial. For 3 years, I had believed Claire destroyed me to protect her affair and her pride. That had been painful enough. But this was colder, more practical. They had not just wanted me gone from the marriage. They had wanted me away from the paperwork. The public humiliation had not been an emotional explosion. It had been a diversion staged under a tent with flowers. Madison sat across from me, careful not to crush her dress. "I should have told you," she said. "I wanted to. I came downstairs after you left. I told Claire she had lied. I said you weren't dangerous. You were right." She slapped me. Madison said it softly, with no drama. That made it worse. Mom told me not to be hysterical. Dad said if I repeated what I heard, he would stop paying my tuition and tell my graduate program I had stolen medication from my mother. I stared at her. "Had you?" "No." Her eyes filled, but she held my gaze. "But Mom had pills everywhere after her surgery. Dad said people would believe a troubled daughter before they believed a respected donor. I was 23. I was scared. And then Claire came into my room that night and told me family loyalty meant protecting things outsiders wouldn't understand. She inhaled, slowly. She called you an outsider. After you had spent 4 years trying to belong. That word landed harder than I expected. Outsider. Claire had never said it to my face. Not exactly. But she had decorated our marriage with the idea. My family was sweet, but simple. My clothes were fine, but conservative. My parents were lovely, but not really gala people. My caution was insecurity. My honesty was bluntness. I had been welcomed into their home, the way a guest is welcomed into a museum. Allowed to admire, never allowed to touch anything important. Madison looked toward the door, then lowered her voice. After the divorce, I started saving things. At first, it was because I felt guilty. Then it was because I realized they hadn't stopped. Dad moved money between non-profit projects. Daniel built shell consulting contracts. Claire signed off on donor reports because nobody questioned her. I didn't understand all of it, but I knew enough to keep copies. My pulse changed. Not fear exactly. Something sharper. Where are they? Not here. She shook her head. I'm not that foolish. They're with Aaron's cousin, who works in forensic accounting in Atlanta. I gave him a folder last month because I thought I was losing my mind. He said I wasn't. He said the pattern was real. He also said your name appeared in 2 internal emails from 3 years ago. Not as a threat, as the reason they needed to move fast. The room seemed to narrow around us. My name, sitting inside their private correspondence, turning me from husband into obstacle. I thought about all the nights I had lain awake, wondering what I could have said differently under that tent. Whether I had been too direct, whether I had made Claire feel cornered, whether there had been a version of that evening where dignity survived. The answer had apparently been no. They had already chosen the ending. Madison reached Tenso a small satin clutch on the table and pulled. She slid it across to me. I did not touch it at first. Some part of me knew that once I read whatever was on that paper, the old wound would stop being a fog and become a map. Fog lets you blame yourself. Maps show you who built the road. The email was short. From Daniel to Claire. Copied to Richard. Dated 2 days before the anniversary party. If Noah keeps looking at vendor trails, R.H. needs to neutralize before board review. Personal instability angle is safest. C. Can trigger if necessary. My vision blurred, then cleared with brutal precision. C. Can trigger. Not Claire can explain. Not Claire can calm him. Claire can trigger. My pain had been part of a strategy. I folded the paper once, carefully, because if I did not move slowly, my hands would shake. Madison watched me like she expected anger, maybe even deserved it. But the anger did not come the way it used to. It rose cold, not hot. It did not make me want to shout. It made me want to understand every line, every date, every person who had benefited from my silence. Why tonight, I asked. Madison pressed her lips together. Because Claire tried to do it to Aaron. I looked up. She cornered him 2 weeks ago at my parents' house. Madison said. She told him marriage into our family required discretion. Then she hinted that if he ever encouraged me to question Dad's business, he would regret it professionally. Aaron is a civil engineer. He works on municipal contracts. Claire mentioned one by name. Madison's voice broke for the first time. She smiled while she did it, like she was offering advice. That was the first moment I saw the whole shape of it. This was not remorse dressed up for a wedding. This was a woman finally seeing the family weapon turn toward the man she loved. It did not make Madison's silence painless, but it made it human. People are brave in theory, until fear walks into their own house and sits at the breakfast table. Then courage becomes specific. "What does Aaron know?" I asked. "Enough," she said. "Not everything." I didn't want to turn our wedding into a trial. She wiped under one eye with the tip of her finger. But I also didn't want to start my marriage by pretending Claire's cruelty is just personality and Dad's threats are just tradition. I invited you because I owed you the truth, and because if they try to rewrite tonight, I wanted one person in this building who knows how they do it. Before I could answer, voices passed in the hallway. Madison froze. We both listened. A woman laughed. Then heels clicked away toward the ballroom. Madison exhaled. The fear in her face made me realize she was still 23 in certain rooms. Still, the younger daughter, trained to make herself small when louder people wanted peace. I had been angry at her silence for years. Sitting there, I understood that silence can be a cage before it becomes a choice. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know that doesn't fix anything. I know I don't get to hand you one email and ask you to make me feel clean, but I am sorry. Noah, for the window, for watching you leave, for every Thanksgiving after, when they said your name like you were a disease, and I let them." I looked at the photocopy in my hand. There were many things I could have said. I could have told her her apology was late. I could have told her she had cost me friends, work, years of sleep. All of that would have been true. But truth is not always the same as usefulness. And I had learned to choose my words by what they built, not just what they burned. "You were afraid," I said. Her face crumpled a little. "That does not make it okay," I added, "but it makes it something I can understand." Madison covered her mouth, and for a second, she was not a bride, not a hawthorn, not a witness carrying evidence in satin shoes. She was a person who had been raised inside a beautiful house where love always came with conditions written in invisible ink. I knew that house. I had tried to live in it. I had mistaken being allowed inside for being accepted. A knock sounded at the door before either of us could say more. Not polite, not accidental. 3 firm taps. Madison stood so quickly. Her chair scraped the rug. The door opened before she reached it, and Claire stepped in with Daniel behind her. She had a champagne flute in one hand and a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Well," Claire said, looking from Madison to me to the paper in my hand, "this is touching." Madison's shoulders pulled back, but I saw her fingers tighten in the lace of her skirt. Daniel closed the door behind him. He was broader than I remembered, polished in the expensive way men get when no one has told them no in a long time. His gaze dropped to the photocopy, then lifted to my face. No surprise, only calculation. Claire sighed as if we had disappointed her. "Maddie, it is your wedding night. Guests are asking where you are. And Noah, honestly, I thought we were past this need to make every family event about your feelings." The old sentence structure was still there. Warm tone. Poison center. Madison opened her mouth, but I stood first. Slowly, I placed the photocopy on the table beside the bouquet. Face down. We were having a private conversation, I said. Claire laughed softly. "That was always your problem. You heard the word private and assumed it meant important." She turned to Madison. "You are not doing this tonight. Not with him. Not after everything he put this family through. Madison looked at her sister for a long moment. You mean after everything you blamed on him? The room went still. Even Claire needed a second to adjust. I saw it then. The tiny fracture in her composure. Not because Madison had shouted, but because she hadn't. Claire knew what anger looked like. She knew how to use tears against it. Calm resistance gave her less to hold. Daniel stepped forward. This is inappropriate. Madison, your father is looking for you. That name still worked on her body. Her chin dipped before she caught herself. Claire noticed and smiled. There it is, she said gently. Come on. We'll fix your makeup. Aaron doesn't need to see you spiraling on the night he married you. Something in me changed at the word spiraling. Maybe because it was so familiar. Maybe because I remembered how easily one word can become a diagnosis when the right person repeats it to the right audience. I looked at Madison, and I knew if she walked out with Claire then, the machine would start again before the cake was cleared. She isn't spiraling, I said. Claire turned her smile on me. Noah, this is not your marriage. No, I said, but I know what it looks like when you try to control the story before anyone else can speak. Her eyes cooled. Daniel's jaw shifted. Madison looked at me like I had opened a door she had forgotten existed. For a moment, none of us moved. The ballroom music floated through the wall, soft and absurd, while the four of us stood in that fake library with a real past between us. Then Claire reached for the photocopy. I picked it up before she touched it. Her smile disappeared. Daniel said my name once. Low and warning. Don't. It was strange how much that single word revealed. Not, don't embarrass yourself. Not, don't upset Madison. Just don't. As if the paper were not an old wound but a live wire. I folded it and put it inside my jacket pocket. My hand was steady now. Completely steady. Claire looked at Madison. You have no idea what you're doing. Madison lifted her chin. For the first time. I think I do. That was when Richard Hawthorne opened the door. He did not knock. Men like Richard considered doors a courtesy. Other people owe them. Evelyn stood behind him, pale and furious, already scanning the room for damage. Richard's eyes moved from Claire to Madison to Daniel, then settled on me with the same expression he had worn when he took my elbow under the anniversary tent. Noah, he said quietly, I think it's time for you to leave. 3 years ago, that sentence had ended the night. I had obeyed because I was shocked, ashamed, and still foolish enough to believe that cooperation would protect my dignity. This time, I looked at Madison first. She was trembling, but she did not look away. Then I looked at Richard and felt the old driveway, the old tent, the old ring on my finger. All of it was still there, but it no longer owned the room. I'll leave, I said, when Madison asks me to. Richard's face hardened by one careful degree. Evelyn made a soft sound, almost a gasp. Claire stared at me as if I had spoken a language she had never heard from my mouth before. And Madison, still in her wedding dress, standing between the family that raised her and the truth they buried, took one breath that seemed to cost her everything. He stays, she said. Richard Hawthorne did not raise his voice. He had never needed volume when money had done the work for him his whole life. He looked at Madison the way a banker looks at a signature line and said, You are emotional. This is a wedding. We will discuss whatever confusion you have after your honeymoon." Then he turned to me, dismissing her in the same breath. "Noah, you have already caused enough damage to this family." Madison's face tightened, but she stayed where she was. That mattered. Aaron entered behind Evelyn before anyone could close the door. His bow tie loosened, concern cutting through the polished reception smile he had worn all evening. He looked first at Madison, then at the rest of us, and I saw him understand the room without needing a full explanation. Some men walk into tension and look for the loudest person. Aaron looked for the person being cornered. "What's going on?" he asked. Claire answered before Madison could. "Your wife is having a difficult moment. Noah has been feeding her old grievances, and now she's upsetting herself over things she doesn't understand," she said, wife with the faintest edge, as if Madison's marriage were already something Claire could manage from the outside. "Take her upstairs. Let her breathe. We'll handle this privately." Aaron moved beside Madison, not in front of her. That was the difference. He did not rescue her by taking her voice. He stood close enough that she could borrow his steadiness if she needed it. "Madison," he said quietly, "what do you want?" The question rearranged the room. Richard's eyes sharpened. Evelyn looked offended, as though asking Madison what she wanted was a breach of etiquette. Claire's mouth parted, then closed. Madison looked at Aaron for a long second, and some silent conversation passed between them that made my chest ache. I had forgotten what love looked like when it did not need witnesses to prove itself. "I want them to stop lying," Madison said. Richard exhaled through his nose. "This is absurd." "No," Aaron said, calmly, not loudly. "It sounds overdue." Daniel stepped closer to Richard, shoulder angling toward me, like he could block consequences with a tailored suit. "This doesn't belong at a wedding," he said. "Whatever papers Noah is waving around, he's doing exactly what Claire said he does. He creates suspicion, then acts wounded when people protect themselves." I almost smiled. There it was, the old frame, brought down from the attic and dusted off. Suspicion. Wounded. Protect themselves. They were counting on the words to fit because they had fit once before. The trouble was that I was no longer desperate to climb out of their version of me. I could stand beside it and let people inspect the seams. "I have not accused anyone in this room of anything tonight," I said. "Madison asked me to listen. That's all." Claire's eyes narrowed. "You always were good at sounding reasonable, right before you made someone else look cruel." That one hit closer than I wanted. Not because it was true, but because I remembered believing it might be. For years with Claire, I had softened every sentence before speaking it. I had learned to start with "maybe I'm wrong," even when I was holding proof. I had apologized for the tone she imagined before I ever got to the pain she caused. Madison reached into her clutch again, but Richard's voice cut through the movement. "Do not," he said. 2 words, not shouted, not the dramatet, but Madison froze as if he had touched her wrist. Aaron saw it. I saw it. Even Evelyn saw it, because she immediately stepped forward and tried to wrap the command in silk. "Darling, your father is trying to protect you. You are tired. Weddings are overwhelming. Don't turn a beautiful night into something people will whisper about." "People are already whispering," Madison said. "They always have. You just taught me to care more about whispers than truth." Evelyn's eyes filled instantly. Claire had learned from a master. After everything we sacrificed for you. That word had been one of the Hawthorne family's favorite locks. Sacrifice. They used it when they meant control. They used it when they meant image. They used it when they wanted gratitude to become a leash. Madison's mouth trembled, but she did not apologize. Aaron took her hand and held it where everyone could see. Richard looked at Aaron then, and the friendliness disappeared. "Young man, you are very new to this family." Aaron nodded once. That may be why I can still see it clearly. The silence after that was so clean it almost rang. Daniel glanced at Claire. Claire glanced at Richard. And in that quick exchange I saw the private chain of command. I had seen it before without understanding it. Claire was not just a spoiled daughter who lied when cornered. She was part of the family system, trained and rewarded to redirect attention whenever Richard needed distance from a paper trail. Richard turned back to me. "What do you want?" "Noah." It was a clever question. Men like Richard love to make truth sound like a demand. If I said apology, he could call me bitter. If I said justice, he could call me obsessed. If I said nothing, he could pretend there was no injury left to address. 3 years earlier, I might have tried to answer from the bruise. That night, I answered from the bone. I want Madison to finish her wedding without being threatened into silence. I said. Claire gave a sharp little laugh. Threatened. There's the performance. Madison suddenly pulled her phone from her clutch. Her fingers moved quickly. Then a recording began playing in the small library. Claire's voice filled the room. Lower than it had been during her toast, but unmistakable. Aaron seems sweet. It would be a shame if people started asking why a city engineer is so close to a family with pending development interests. I'm only saying, Madison. Discretion protects everyone. Aaron went very still. The recording ended. Madison lowered the phone. That was 2 weeks ago in Mom's sunroom. She said, I recorded it because Noah taught me something without knowing it. If someone keeps telling you that you're imagining things, stop arguing and start documenting. For the first time all night, Claire looked truly unprepared. Her recovery took only seconds. But the crack had been there. That was taken out of context. Then, explain the context, Madison said. Claire's mouth tightened. She looked to Daniel. Daniel looked to Richard. Richard's face had gone smooth in a way that made him more dangerous. Not less. Enough. He said, Madison, delete that recording. Now, you will not begin your marriage by betraying your family. There it is again. I said before I could stop myself. Richard looked at me. Excuse me. Family. I said, you keep using it as if it means protection. But every time someone in this room says family, what they mean is silence. Evelyn shook her head. Wounded and elegant. You have no right. No, I said. I didn't. Not for 3 years. I had no right to your dinners, your explanations, or your apologies. I accepted that. But Madison has every right to decide what happens at her own wedding. And Aaron has every right to know when someone threatens his career before the honeymoon starts. Aaron's voice was quiet. What did Claire mean by pending development interests? No one answered him quickly enough. That was when I felt my work brain click into place. The part of me that had survived audits, budget reviews, and men in expensive chairs who smiled while hoping I would miss a decimal. Pending development interests, municipal contracts, Shell, consulting, literacy foundation, hospital grants, different rooms, same smell. I looked at Daniel, and he looked away half a second, too late. What company? I asked Madison. She understood immediately. Pierce Strategic Partners. I almost laughed. But there was no humor in it. That was the vendor name on the gala spreadsheet. Daniel's face hardened. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe not, I said. But I remember the structure. Retainers split under reporting thresholds. Duplicate consulting language. No deliverables attached. 3 years ago, Claire asked me to review a spreadsheet. Then suddenly I was unstable before I could ask why the same vendor appeared twice under 2 project codes. Richard stepped toward me. Be very careful. I looked at him and felt nothing warm. No fear. No urge to win his approval. Just the clear recognition that the man who had once escorted me out had built his power partly on everyone else's hesitation. That is excellent advice. I said, I have been careful for 3 years. I took out my phone and opened the encrypted folder I had not touched in months. I had scanned everything from the black accordion folder during my 2nd year after the divorce. After my therapist asked why I kept a box in my closet like a grave, I told her it was evidence. She asked evidence for whom? I had not known then. Now, standing in that fake library, I finally did. The files appeared in neat rows. Joint account withdrawal. Danielle email. Vendor spreadsheet. Board offer timeline. I did not show them yet. I just let the screen face me and felt the strange weight of preparation without revenge. I had kept the truth not because I wanted to destroy them someday, but because some part of me refused to let their version be the only surviving record. Claire saw enough to understand. You saved our private marriage documents. Our joint bank statements were mine too. I said, the emails copied to me were mine too. The job offer letter with the rescinded follow-up was mine too. And the spreadsheet you asked me to review was never marital. It was foundation business. Evelyn whispered, Noah, please. That please did what her anger could not. It reminded me there had been moments when I had wanted her to be my mother-in-law. Not just Claire's mother. I had brought flowers to her after surgery. I had fixed a broken drawer in her breakfast room because Richard kept saying he would call someone. I had once believed kindness put roots down. I had not understood that in their house, kindness was accepted as service, not returned as loyalty. Madison looked at my phone. You still have it? Yes, I said. Richard's eyes moved toward the door, then back. He was calculating the guests, the donors, the board members in the ballroom, the possibility of public damage. For the first time, I realized the leverage was not that I had documents. It was that tonight, his carefully separated worlds were all in one building. Family, donors, board acquaintances, municipal people. The same audience he had used to shame me could now hear the story he had buried. Claire understood too. Don't do this, she said. Not cruelly this time. Almost softly. Noah, whatever you think happened, making a scene won't heal you? There it was. The gentler blade. She had always known when to lower her voice. In our marriage, That tone had made me doubt my own pulse. It had turned arguments into caretaking. I would end up comforting her for being confronted by me. But the spell was broken now, and beneath the softness I could hear fear scraping the walls. "I am not trying to heal in front of you," I said. "I already did that, somewhere you couldn't interrupt." Madison closed her eyes for 1 second, as if those words had given her something to stand on. Then she opened them and looked at her father. "I'm going back to my reception. I'm going to dance with my husband. Then I'm going to give the thank you speech I planned. And after that, Dad, you are going to stop using my wedding as a shield." Richard's voice dropped. "If you humiliate this family, do not expect this family to support you." Aaron stepped in then, calm as stone. "We didn't ask you to buy our life." Evelyn flinched. Claire's eyes flashed with anger. Daniel muttered something under his breath. I did not catch. But I saw Richard hear it and make the smallest restraining motion with his hand. "Not here. Not yet." The machine was still working. It was just having to work faster. Madison turned to me. "Will you stay?" I looked at the door, beyond which music and laughter kept pretending nothing had shifted. I thought about leaving. It would have been the peaceful choice, or at least the cleanest one. But peace built on someone else's silence is not peace. It is a waiting room for the next victim. Madison had finally opened the door. Aaron was standing beside her, and I had a folder full of ghosts that had waited long enough. "Yes," I said, "but I won't speak unless you ask me to." She nodded. That mattered too. The night belonged to her, not to my revenge, not to Claire's fear, not to Richard's reputation. If the truth came out, it had to come through Madison's choice, not another person seizing her story in the name of saving her. We walked back to the ballroom in a line that would have looked strange to anyone paying attention. Madison and Aaron first, hand in hand, Richard and Evelyn behind them, stiff with rage, Claire beside Daniel, whispering fast, "Me last." With the photocopy in my pocket and my phone in my palm, the hallway seemed longer on the way back, as if the hotel itself knew we were carrying something fragile and explosive beneath the chandeliers. When we entered, the room adjusted. Conversations paused, then resumed too loudly. People noticed Madison's missing veil, Claire's tight smile, Richard's frozen posture. The band was between songs. A waiter moved past with champagne, sensed the current, and wisely kept walking. Madison went straight to the small stage, where the microphone waited for the couple's thank you speech. Claire caught my sleeve before I passed her. Her fingers were cold. "Noah," she whispered, and for 1 second she sounded like the woman I had once planned a future with. "You don't understand what this could do." I looked down at her hand until she released me. I understand exactly what silence already did. Madison tapped the microphone. The ballroom quieted in waves. Aaron stood beside her, one hand resting at her back. Richard had positioned himself near the front, ready to interrupt if he could do it gracefully. Claire and Daniel stood to the side, both smiling, like people posing beside a locked door while smoke slipped out under it. Madison looked across the room, then found me near the edge of the dance floor. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Before we thank all of you," she said, "there is something my family has taught me about loyalty that I need to correct tonight." Madison's first sentence did not sound like an accusation. That was why the room listened. She stood beneath the flowers, with her husband beside her, hands wrapped around the microphone, and spoke like someone placing a glass object on a table without letting it break. I was raised to believe loyalty meant protecting the family story. She said, "Tonight I realized, loyalty without truth is just fear wearing good manners." Richard moved immediately. "Madison," he said, soft enough for the front tables, but sharp enough to cut. "This is not appropriate." Several guests shifted in their chairs, embarrassed in advance. That was how families like the Hawthorns survived. They trained everyone around them to treat exposure as rudeness and cruelty as a private matter. Madison looked at her father, and for one terrible second I thought she might fold. She did not. Aaron touched her back. Not pushing, just reminding her she was not alone. Madison drew one breath. "Dad, you don't get to decide what is appropriate anymore." A sound went through the ballroom. Not loud, more like the air-changing pressure. Claire took one step forward, smiling with her eyes wide, already arranging her face into concern. Daniel reached for her wrist and whispered something, but she shook him off. Claire spoke before Madison could continue. "Maddie, sweetheart, nobody is trying to silence you. We're worried because you're overwhelmed." She turned slightly, letting the whole room see her pained expression. "This is exactly why family things should stay in family rooms. You don't want people remembering your wedding as the night you hurt your parents." Madison looked down at the microphone, then back at Claire. "No," she said. "I don't want people remembering my wedding as the night I lied for them again." Claire's smile disappeared completely. Madison reached into Aaron's jacket pocket and pulled out her phone. 2 weeks ago, my sister warned my husband that his job could suffer if he encouraged me to ask questions about my father's business. The recording played through the ballroom speakers because Aaron had already connected her phone to the sound system for their thank you video. Claire's voice filled the room, clean and unmistakable, mentioning Aaron's municipal contract by name and calling discretion the price of being close to the Hawthorne family. Nobody moved. Even the waiters at the back stopped pretending to adjust silverware. When the recording ended, the silence was not polite anymore. It was awake. Claire laughed once, but it came out wrong. That was private advice, twisted by a scared little sister who has always misunderstood adult consequences. She looked at Aaron then, making him the target. "You should be careful. Encouraging this kind of public breakdown is not love." Aaron's face stayed calm, but I saw his hand close around Madison's. He did not answer for her. He did something better. He let everyone watch her answer for herself. "I understand consequences now," Madison said. "I understand that when Noah asked normal questions about foundation vendors 3 years ago, this family did not answer him. You destroyed his reputation instead." Richard's head snapped toward me, and I felt the room follow his gaze. For the second time in my life, I stood inside a Hawthorne party while strangers waited to decide what kind of man I was. This time, I did not shrink. Richard stepped toward the stage. "That is a defamatory statement." Madison looked at me. "Noah, may I show them?" The question mattered. It gave me back something they had taken under that tent: consent. I walked to the stage slowly, feeling every eye in the ballroom. I did not look at Claire. I did not look at Richard. I opened my phone, found the scanned email, and handed it to Madison. She read it once, swallowed. And then Aaron projected it onto the screen, meant for childhood photos. The email appeared behind them in huge black letters. Danielle to Claire. Richard copied. If Noah keeps looking at vendor trails, R.H. needs to neutralize before board review. Personal instability angle is safest. C. can trigger, if necessary. Nobody laughed. Nobody whispered at first. The words were too plain. They had no chandelier to hide behind. Claire's face went white beneath her makeup. And Daniel looked like a man watching a door lock from the wrong side. Richard did what powerful men do when proof appears. He attacked the process. "This is unauthorized private correspondence," he said. "No one here knows where that came from." I took the microphone only after Madison held it out to me. My voice sounded lower than I expected. It came from an email account that accidentally copied me 3 years ago. I printed it the day after your anniversary party. I also saved the vendor spreadsheet Claire asked me to review. On the screen. Aaron opened the next file from my phone. The spreadsheet looked boring, which made it worse. Numbers always do. Duplicate retainers. Consulting fees below. Review thresholds. Peer strategic partners. Repeated under separate project codes. I did not accuse them of a crime. I did not need to. I explained the pattern the way I would explain it to a board committee calm. Specific and impossible to dress up as emotion. 3 days after I questioned this, I said, "Claire accused me publicly of paranoia." The next morning, my job offer with the Literacy Foundation disappeared. After Richard called the board chair, I thought for years that I was collateral damage in a failing marriage. Tonight, Madison showed me. I was removed because I had noticed something. Claire moved toward the stage. "You are still doing it," she said, voice shaking now. "You are still making yourself the victim. I made mistakes, but you were impossible to live with. You questioned everything. You made me feel watched." There it was. The old music. The room almost knew the tune, but Madison stopped it before it could become a song again. "You were having an affair with Daniel," Madison said, "and you used Noah's hurt to hide Dad's records." The sentence landed like a chair falling in church. Daniel grabbed Claire's arm, but this time she jerked away because the performance needed both hands. "How dare you," she said. Real tears now. Or close enough. "I protected this family while you played innocent. You have no idea what Dad carried. What I carried. What sacrifices we made so you could have your perfect little wedding." Madison stared at her sister, and something in her face finally hardened past fear. "You didn't sacrifice for me. You spent years cashing checks from a machine you pretended not to understand." Then she looked at the guests. "Copies of these documents are already with a forensic accountant and will be delivered to the foundation boards connected to these projects. I am not asking anyone here to judge them tonight. I am telling you I will not be used as cover." Richard's composure cracked at the edges. "You ungrateful child." That was the sentence that finished him. Not the email. Not the spreadsheet. Not even the recording. It was the way he said child to a grown woman in her wedding dress. In front of her husband, after she had calmly revealed years of threats. The room heard ownership in it. They heard punishment. They heard the family word without the costume. Aaron took the microphone from Madison for the first time. "My wife and I will be leaving now," he said. "Anyone who came to celebrate our marriage is welcome to stay. Eat cake. and dance. Anyone who came to manage her obedience can go home." He handed the microphone back to the band leader, then turned to Madison. She looked stunned for half a breath, then laughed through tears. It was the first free sound I had heard from her all night. Claire tried one final turn toward me. She stepped close enough that I could smell the champagne on her breath. "Noah, please," she whispered. "Don't send those files. Whatever happened between us, you loved me once, for years. That might have undone me, not because I wanted her back, but because I had once believed love required rescue, even after betrayal." I looked at the woman who had called me unsafe to keep herself safe. "I did love you," I said. "That is why what you did worked." Her face changed, not into remorse, into irritation that remorse had not been enough. "So this is revenge?" "No," I said. "Revenge would have been building my life around hurting you. I didn't. I built it around never needing you to tell the truth before I could live." I stepped back. The files go where they belong. What happens after that is not my performance. Claire, it's your consequence. She slapped me. Not hard enough to injure, hard enough for the room to hear. Daniel cursed under his breath. Evelyn covered her mouth. Richard closed his eyes as if the real offense was not the slap, but the witnesses. My cheek stung, but I did not touch it. I simply looked at Claire until she understood that I was not going to give her the explosion she needed. A woman from one of the foundation boards stood from a table near the front. I recognized her vaguely. Silver-haired, composed. The kind of donor who asked quiet questions and remembered answers. "Mr. Bennett," she said. "I would appreciate receiving those materials." Another man stood after her. Then another. The room did not turn into chaos. It turned into something worse, for the Hawthorne's procedure. Names, requests, consequences with calendars attached. Madison and Aaron left through the side doors to change for their send-off. Not fleeing, just choosing not to spend another minute being consumed by the family that had fed on silence. Before she disappeared, Madison crossed the dance floor and hugged me. "I know this doesn't give you back what we took," she said into my shoulder. I closed my eyes once. "No," I said, "but it gives the truth somewhere to stand." Richard and Evelyn left before the cake was cut. Daniel followed after a phone call that made his face look 10 years older. Claire stayed a little longer. Maybe because pride would not let her run. Maybe because she still believed she could find a person in that room willing to choose the prettier lie. I watched people avoid her gently, politely, devastatingly. That is how reputation dies among the well-mannered, not with shouting, with chairs left empty around you. I went home after midnight with my cheeks still warm and my phone full of messages from people who had once gone quiet. Some apologized. Some asked questions. Some wrote paragraphs explaining how they had always wondered. I did not answer most of them. I had learned that delayed belief is not the same as loyalty. It can be kind. It can be welcome. But it does not get to demand immediate intimacy from the person it left alone. The next week was not cinematic. There were no police lights outside, mansions. No dramatic confession on the courthouse steps. There were emails to boards, requests for records, resignations, phrased as transitions, and a quiet announcement that Richard Hawthorne was stepping back from several charitable roles for personal reasons. Pierce Strategic Partners lost 2 contracts, pending review. Claire deleted her social media for a month. That, in her world, it was almost a death. Madison and Aaron postponed their honeymoon by 1 week, and then went anyway. She sent me one photo from a beach in Maine. Both of them in sweaters, smiling into wind instead of perfection. The message underneath said, "We're learning peace." I stared at that sentence longer than I expected. Peace was not the absence of damage. Peace was the first room nobody could drag you out of. I finally opened the black accordion folder when I got home from work that Friday. For 3 years, it had sat in my closet like a sealed witness. I took out the papers, scanned the few I had missed, and then placed the originals in a new storage box labeled Records. Not marriage. That small change embarrassed me with its power. The same paper, a different name. Sometimes healing is not throwing the past away. Sometimes it is filing it where it belongs. A month later, Madison asked if I would meet her for coffee. Not as a Hawthorne apology tour. Not as a bridge back to her family. Just two people who had survived different sides of the same house. We sat at a small cafe with scratched wooden tables, and she told me she had gone no contact with Claire for now, and limited contact with her parents. She said it calmly, but her hands shook when she lifted her cup. "Does it stop feeling cruel?" she asked. I thought about the driveway, the fake library, the dance floor, the years I mistook boundaries for bitterness, because people who benefited from my softness kept calling it love. "No," I said. "It stops feeling like cruelty against them and starts feeling like mercy toward yourself." Madison nodded. And for once, neither of us tried to make the truth prettier than it was. I never got the apology from Claire that people think endings require. She sent one email 6 weeks later with no subject line. It said she was sorry if I felt harmed by a complicated time in all our lives. I read it once, smiled without humor, and archived it. Not every message deserves a reply. Not every sorry is an apology. Some are just another hand reaching for the steering wheel after the crash. The last time I saw the Beaumont Hotel, I was walking past it on my way to a meeting. The front doors were open, and through them I could see the marble lobby, polished and bright, ready for the next family to perform happiness under expensive lights. I paused for only a second. 3 years earlier, rooms like that had made me feel smaller. Now they just looked like rooms. I used to think being chosen meant being defended by the people who claimed you. I know better now. Being chosen is not a toast, a ring, a last name, or a seat at a family table where the price of belonging is silence. Being chosen is someone asking what you want when everyone else is telling you what to feel. Being chosen is the truth, staying in the room after the music stops. Silence is not always weakness. Sometimes it is survival. Sometimes it is a folder in the closet, a phone recording in a satin clutch, a bride's hand shaking before she finally lifts the microphone. But silence becomes dangerous when cruel people mistake it for permission. That night, none of us became louder than them. We became clearer. And clarity can ruin a lie faster than rage ever could. I still dance rarely. That surprises people. They assume one public dance changed everything. As if healing should turn into a symbol you can put in a frame. But I remember it differently. I remember Madison's trembling hand, Claire's vanishing smile, and the sentence that opened a locked room inside both of us. My ex's sister asked me for one dance, then whispered that Claire never deserved me. The truth was, by the end of that night, I finally believed it too.